Hey everybody, we are Francis, Martin, and Robert, and this is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free.
Welcome back to Snakes and Otters. This is episode 59.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis, sitting in the captain's chair once again. Boys, it's our Code of Honor episode again. We keep getting better and better every time we do these things, not to completely just go over the top with gushing for how well we do things around here. But
would you like to be alone with yourself, Francis? You're really
No.
You're going to get where your head doesn't fit out the door anymore, man.
Yeah, we don't need that. My wife is an expert at popping that head when it gets too big. She's very good at that. Fortunately, she's in the other room.
All wives are. All wives
This
are.
is true. It's not unique to her, but she's very, very efficient at it. If she's got the metaphorical needle. Eviscerating. That's not a bad word. When I deserve it, of course. Which is sometimes,
Yeah. So yes, metaphorical needle into the metaphorical boil that is your inflated head.
That's very well put, sir. I'm liking that. Which is Code of Honor is all about great sayings. So why not, make that one be that turn of phrase that is so good that when we find something that's really cool and we just kind of love it, and that's what we work with around here, and that's what we're doing this episode. Yet again, you'd think we'd run out of things to say, but ain't no such thing. Not with Snakes and Otters. That's right. We've always got something to say.
Oh, but before we get started, though, we do have a little business to do, right, Francis? I'm going to let you take this.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
we wanted to raise a glass to a couple of folks.
Something that we do periodically whenever the need comes about. We actually have two this time, and it is not the irony is not lost on me, nor other you two as well, I'm sure, that these two guys, and they happen to be both men, that we're raising a glass to are some of the greatest storytellers in modern time periods. And they've just recently passed away, both of them. And they're in the comic book field, which, hey, we're comic book guys. We love it. Anybody that has done great work there, we're going to recognize them. But two great talents, and I know Robert will certainly talk about them as much as I will, but I'll give you the first one. I'll go ahead and lay them both out, and we'll just kind of talk about it for just a second as we raise our glasses, one of which is the great writer Denny O'Neil from DC Comics, but I think he did work elsewhere too.
Did he work for Marvel?
That's a good question. I'm
briefly, yes.
He must have.
Exactly. He's one of the giants of the industry. He's one of the greatest writers I've ever read. I truly believe that. He successfully took Batman away from the camp of the late 1960s and made it serious again, made it dangerous again. He took away all that silliness that was in the 50s and 60s and that the television show kind of acerbated, and made it really great stuff. He wrote Green Lantern, Green Arrow, which were some of the cutting-edge, societally relevant stories in the early 70s that danced along the edge of the neutral zone in many ways, certainly with regards to the comic book code. And we cannot even begin to give you a full CV of him because he did so many things.
So much, yeah. Yeah, you're right. He made him the detective again.
That's correct, yes.
And in fact, one of Denny O'Neil's creations was Ra's al Ghul, who always called Bruce Wayne and Batman the detective. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Denny actually, if I remember correctly, and if I'm wrong, listeners I'm sure will correct us, if not ourselves. I want to say that this move actually started when Carmine Infantino was the penciler. He was also publisher and editor at various times throughout the 60s and into the 70s. And I want to say Infantino was actually the artist, and he might have been the penciler before Neil Adams with Denny O'Neil, but I think you have to, at least on Batman, you gotta mention Carmine as well.
Very much so, yeah.
The great thing about him as a creator was that he was not afraid to tackle issues of the day. He was not afraid to make controversial decisions in his storytelling. I want to say that the famous issue of Green Lantern, Green Arrow with Speedy shooting up heroin. So they did the drug story. It was actually after Marvel's drug story.
It was,
but
yes,
they were very close together. It was not. It was still unique for them to even talk about such things.
Oh yeah, to actually take a hero and turn him into a junkie was it was beyond the pale. I mean, it pushed the envelope even further than Stan Lee did with the Spider-Man story, which was
right.
the first time. This one here this was in your face, and he also had a great artist to work with
too. But it wasn't. It was a supporting character.
That's right. It was this was first
character too, but he's like you say, he's one of the heroes.
That's right.
Yeah, not just the friend of the hero, but one of the hero characters.
Yeah,
falling off the straight path there.
That's right, and he introduced, in many respects, the nuance and complexity that he introduced into comic storytelling has stayed with us ever since, because people realized we can write good stuff. We really can. This is not for kids stuff anymore. We're really writing some deep stuff. One of my very favorite series that he did in the 80s was The Question, which took the old Charlton hero that Steve Ditko created in the 70s and when DC bought the characters, when Charlton imploded, he and Dennis Cowan did some amazingly serious, deep, dark, realistic stuff on that, like 50 so issues, and wow, that's just my memory of Denny O'Neil. But he did so many things. I mean, he was Justice League writer. Of course, he was Batman. He worked with just about every artist that you can think of. Neil Adams, in particular, was one of his great, strong collaborators. We've lost a giant, folks.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you wanted to, he's top 5 of those great names.
When you look at his corpus of work, it's breathtaking in its scope and the number of characters he worked on. At Marvel, he's probably best known for Iron Man and Daredevil. Maybe not best known. That's not the best way to put it, but those are notable because he did the same thing or a similar thing that he did at DC, and that is, Marvel was the first to give the heroes flaws. And, they fought, they argued, they had bad tempers. But Denny O'Neil was really good at exploiting that. Now, Iron Man, he kind of revisited an old flaw because he returned Tony Stark to alcoholism so bad that he became a homeless bum for a while. And that's when Rhodey became Iron Man.
That's right. I'd forgotten he did that. He
was the villain and the villain in the original Iron Man movie was created by Denny O'Neil.
That's right, Obadiah Stane. That's right, exactly. That Jeff Bridges played so amazingly.
Oh yeah.
That was a Denny O'Neil creation. See, we can't even begin to scratch the surface on all the great things that he did. We miss him. And he had been in many respects one of those ambassadors for the medium for a long time. He was one of the revered grandfathers who was still active. I mean, he was still writing stuff as much as he wanted to. I don't know that he ever really retired because he just was so fertile of a mind, so fecund, if we can use that word.
Who was your other creator there?
That's correct. Again, Denny O'Neil is so big, I didn't mean to go off and leave this next guy because he is so incredible as an artist. Joe Sinnott. And Robert can probably talk as much about him or more than I can. He was the house look for Marvel there for a while. He was an inker. He was such a clean, beautiful inker, though. My favorite work of his, and this is probably everybody that knew him, was on the Fantastic Four. He inked from like issue 40 in the mid-'60s right up until, the early 80s. I mean, it's 16, 17 years?
Until John Byrne took over.
Until John Byrne took over to start inking his own stuff. Right.
Like he did something like 200 issues, give or take a little under 200.
I know, which is, I mean, think about that. That's
actually, you know what? I say that he did more than 200 because after Byrne left, at some point he returned to the title in the 300s of the book.
He in many respects, the look, if you follow comic books at all, the look of the Fantastic Four is more him than anything because he was able to synchronize various artists. His inking Kirby is still the best. He's still, I think, the best Kirby inker that I've ever seen. Now, that's an arguable point, I know. Kirby inking himself was pretty damned awesome, too. But,
he didn't do it very often, though.
But that's right. I mean, it's only when he went and did, he would always have somebody that would do that with him. But, wow, Joe Sinnott was just an amazing. I have on my wall here in my office a poster of the Fantastic Four signed by Joe Sinnott. It's not his actual signature. It's one of those posters you buy with his signature. But nevertheless, he was a giant. He really was, too. And we got a twofer for these guys. Yeah. Both of them just passed within the last few weeks. So we got to raise a glass. And I'm bringing out the good stuff for these guys. I've got my Knob Creek again, which is, the super premium.
Excellent.
These guys deserve that, for sure.
What have you got, Robert?
I'm dipping into the Maker's 46 tonight.
Good stuff, good stuff. I am, of course, still sticking with the Larceny for right now.
We have got to get together in person because we have to finish that bottle for you. You've been using it for a long period of time.
When we get together in person,
that's true.
We are cracking that bullet.
The bullet, that's correct. You're right. We do have to do that. Maybe we'll just drink both.
Yes, we will. We will. I don't care if they're both open, but I'm saving that one to crack with Francis and Robert. So here's to Denny O'Neil and Joe Sinnott.
Amen. Long may they reign as kings of their particular idiom, shall we say.
Idiom, yes.
That's right. Idiom. To quote Monty Python again.
All right. So let's get busy. Let's get busy on a code of honor here.
Oh,
Francis, what do you think? You want to go first, buddy?
I'm happy to go first. I'm captaining. Might as well. I mean, it's one that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And I say that every once in a while. And sometimes it just comes from wherever it's going to come from on that. But I really want to go with Nelson Mandela, believe it or not. Probably one of his most famous quotes that I can give you. It's a fantastic quote. It's very famous. You've probably, if you look up Nelson Mandela quote, this is the one that's going to come to the top of the list. It's brief, but it's one of my favorite subjects, the subject of courage. I think that is something that we need as a society so much. And in dark times especially, there seems to be a lack of it. People would rather cover their own arses, as it were, than actually take a stand and be courageous. And this quotation explains just exactly what courage is, and I'll give it to you right now. I don't have the year that he did this, but it was after his imprisonment. It was when he was president. And he's reflecting back on his imprisonment during those many years. That's kind of what led him to make this quotation. And the quotation is, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." And I still get chills every time I read it and every time I say it out loud. Boys, what do you think?
Well, I think the interesting part here, too, is there's a distinction between moral courage and physical courage. And I think he's trying to encapsulate how to take a moral stand, how to have moral courage to stand against the tide.
Often I think moral courage is harder to express than physical courage, because physical courage is going to be partly based in your autonomic system, in your fight or flight response. And often, if your life is on the line, that physical courage is just the unwillingness to die or the, too scared to take it. So moral courage is often requires more thought and more deliberation. And that can sometimes be harder because, if you die, you don't have to live with the consequences if it goes wrong. Not that that's not a deterrent. But overall, I think moral courage, that's a much tougher one to express and hang on to.
Are you suggesting then that courage is innate or not, as the case may be?
No, it's only innate in the sense that it's one of the two primal responses that is built into us. And that is, again, fight or flight.
Right.
Every animal has that. Even the most docile animal, if you corner it, will fight. Even a bunny rabbit will fight because he has big, sharp, and dusty, pointy teeth.
I was expecting you to go
there. Look at the bones. Look at the bones.
That's right.
Look at the bones.
To quote Steve Rogers, we can do this all day.
Right. So yes, courage is innate, but as in anything, it's the potential is at least the physical courage. But I think courage, is definitely an innate trait to everything that has that autonomic response, that fight or flight, because like I said, if you're cornered, you will fight. But that's the physical. That's partially driven by the adrenaline and the specifics of the situation. Mm-hmm. Whereas the moral courage, it's rare that just happens like that, like fight or flight. There's no fight or flight equivalent to moral courage.
I think you're exactly right. It's physical courage is often a response to a stimulus, and it's often a snap response. If you're a decent human being, you see somebody in trouble, you run to try to help.
Right. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. Moral courage takes quite a lot of consideration, because the consequences can be pretty devastating.
Yes. And that's what I was talking about with the with physical courage, if you fail, you may not have to live with the consequences. With moral courage, you do. There's shame, there's being discredited, there's all kinds of personal and sometimes familial consequences, not just for you, but for family, for taking a moral stand and failing at that, or being on the wrong side. Sometimes the moral stand you choose is the wrong side of history. And
that's correct.
We're seeing it times right now.
Mm-hmm. So courage does not necessarily imply that you are correct or incorrect in your decision. It simply it lets you know that you are willing to stand for something. Moral courage. We'll make that.
Well, even physical courage, you could say it's not necessarily right because you could have ran away and lived another day. But yes, it's very much so. You do not have to be right to have courage.
Right.
You just have to have conviction.
Sure. And courage is not the same thing as foolhardiness here. We're making a distinction. Is that fair enough? Because you can be foolishly courageous, and but moral courage is something very different. I'm thinking here.
I don't know. I think you could be foolish on moral issues. But that's mainly because you just haven't thought it through. And again, you see it today. With the racial unrest and the riots that we've seen and the protests related to Black Lives Matter, we all have seen knee-jerk reactions to these things, and people come off often as taking a moral stand, having moral courage to say all lives matter, blah, blah, blah. And that's not necessarily a moral stand. And it's a moral stand in the sense that, yes, that is correct, but it's missing the point.
That's right. It's tone deaf.
And just because when you say all lives matter, for instance, ignoring or trying to include, yes, Black Lives Matter, what you're doing is missing the point about we're saying Black Lives Matter because they're not mattering all the time when they should.
Correct. And to say that
circumstance involved.
You're saying that what your issue is not an issue. And of course we recognize that can't be. That's not correct here. It's interesting that you say that because one of the things that we're dealing with currently in the society that's related to what you're talking about is the removal of civic monuments to the Confederacy all over the South, which we've talked about before is a great thing. In fact, the day we were recording this, Stonewall Jackson's statue on Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia, is being taken down, and people are applauding this.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? And so many people just didn't see it as a problem. And I think that's a failure of imagination for so many. And I'm not going to use the word woke, but there's some truth to that terminology, whereas all of a sudden we realize, yeah, that was wrong. And that kind of gets back to my point on courage, is that those people, and I'm stealing from Robert E. Lee, that's famously how he would refer to the other side, but those people who believed in the Confederacy did so courageously, but were morally not just flawed, flat out wrong. They hitched their wagon to a cause that was reprehensible, and yet they did this by the thousands, by the tens and hundreds of thousands. Is vested interest something that can overpower, that can smoke screen courage, or co-opt is probably the better word, co-opt what you would otherwise be intelligent people to become give their lives for a cause that was ultimately bankrupt?
I don't know that I would use co-opt because it implies that there's only one way that would be the correct use of courage. Not every case is as cut and dried as that. So I don't know that I would say co-opt, because you can be courageous about things that are just as right as something else.
Sure.
They just don't have the quite the consequences as something like the Confederacy. The Confederacy, you could make an intellectual argument that had it not been created in response to the ever-growing drive to eliminate slavery, that the philosophical underpinnings aside from that might have been a good thing. Don't know. I would prefer it not happen, whether that, even if slavery were not part of the equation there. Right. I much prefer us to be one united country.
Right.
And without slavery.
And that's been kind of one of the debates that we've had in recent years. We might remember the great movie, one of our favorite movies, Gettysburg, by Ted Turner. And there's some of that language is put in there saying, we should have freed the slaves and then fired on Fort Sumter. Well, that's not something anybody in the Confederacy would have ever said. That's just trying to make something palatable enough to be shown in a movie.
I don't know. There were probably some abolitionists in the Confederacy. Probably not many. They probably went north.
But, yeah, they weren't tolerated well. Well, I mean,
there were figures in the Confederacy who realized that once the North makes the war about slavery, their cause is then doomed.
Because that's correct.
It did become a moral blindness that allowed them to convince themselves that the war was not about slavery, even though it was obvious to everyone who thought about it. The country's not fracturing over any other issue.
Right, it's not fracturing over taxation of trade routes.
Yes,
That's
it's not fracturing over the
states' rights. I mean, that's
states' rights, or
used to.
the Bank of the United States, or the public credit. It's not fracturing over where canals are being built. It's fracturing because there is a way of life in the South that is nearly feudal in its construction, and the North is becoming awake to this and sees that it needs to end.
That's right.
And so they had a moral blindness that did not allow them, or that allowed them to delude themselves into, well, this is about states' rights, or this is because the North is down. The very famous, I'm fighting because you're down here statement.
Right. Which those are all euphemisms. Ultimately, you have to have euphemisms to cover doing something as heinous as human slavery. Right. And that's the only way that they were able to gin up enough support to actually go to war and have people die in the great big bleeding batches because of that. And that kind of makes me worry about the human race, boys, because if we're able to be deluded to do something so awful just because we're convinced to do so through euphemism and through language and other things.
Well, that's not new, and it's not stopped. I mean,
exactly my point.
But I mean, that's been going on since the beginning.
But yes, but now humanity has snakes and otters.
That's true.
Okay. So, yeah, those of us who stand up and recognize and call something what it is, and if they will only just listen to us.
Yes, we're standing athwart history, yelling, not just stop, but think about what you're doing.
The line must be drawn here, this far, and no further.
That's it's a very passable Patrick Stewart imitation there, sir. That's right.
As I always say, not only are those who forget history doomed to repeat it, those who know history are doomed to watch. Sometimes I do feel like we're watching and sometimes powerless, but we just have to keep taking that moral stand.
Oh, you're exactly right. I mean, and I say this all the time. If you went back in time the day before the Titanic sailed, nobody would believe you anyway. Sometimes it takes an enormous, terrible tragedy to awaken people who shouldn't be asleep, but yet they are on certain issues. And the Civil War is a great example. There's no way you could go back and convince anybody to be different.
Yeah, don't do this.
That's right.
Before we move on from this, one thing I want to go back to, and this is what Francis had said, and we kind of glossed over it a little bit, kind of ran roughshod past it, but you had said something about, does self-interest co-opt courage for a bad cause, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And I disagreed with the co-opt part.
Right.
But I want to dig into a little bit about that self-interest part.
Yeah.
Because to me, we never do anything without self-interest.
Right.
The measure of self-interest can be very small, from the avoidance of a minor irritation, all the way to a massive cause to free an entire people from slavery. No matter what you are courageous about, or being that animal trapped in the corner, you will do something out of self-interest in the sense you get something out of it, even if it's only a lack of an irritation. So self-interest, I think, is almost always going to be part of it. For instance, those who were in the North that wanted to free the slaves, you say, well, there's no self-interest in there. No, there is, because their self-interest it does have a moral aspect to it.
Right.
Moral people should not stand by while anyone is enslaved, while anyone is treated with less than the inherent dignity of being a human person that they are due.
Ding, ding, ding. You're exactly right. That's right, because the entire concept of live and let live is often problematic when you're faced with moral dilemmas like the question of slavery during the Civil War. And
live and let live works when you're trying to decide where to go to dinner.
Well, that's correct. There's plenty of places for that. But when there's a higher level of morality that, to get back to the original quote that Mandela is talking about here, that you have to be able to overcome your fears to stand up for what is right. And in many respects, those in the North, the abolitionists who started the movement, but all those who signed on over time for that issue, Lincoln being the brilliant politician that he was in the Emancipation Proclamation, brought it front and center. But he took the cover off the elephant that was in the middle of the room.
Yep.
And let everybody see it.
Yep.
Because that's what it was. It was always that. It was nothing other than that. Everything else was a euphemism.
Well, and really the greatest part about doing it, granted, it was kind of a half-assed proclamation because it only freed slaves in territories that the Union did not control. Yeah. But it was a shot across the bow saying, we're going to do this. It was also letting those up north that didn't care whether the slaves were freed or not know that it's going to happen. When the war's over and we've won, and the Union is whole, they're going to be freed.
That's correct. And it's kind of amazing to me that the South tries to sue for peace in early 1865, and the movie Lincoln shows this very well, with Alexander Stephens and his folks come and they say, well, we want to come back, let's have peace, but we're going to keep slaves. And he says, and Grant says, no, you're not. It's not about that. That ship has sailed. It's done. The slavery will end. You can either, if you want to end it now, well, we can talk. But we're probably going to be doing this once you surrender, and which of course is exactly what happened. Actually, only within the next 6-8 weeks from the time that conversation took place.
Yeah.
Right. Suing for peace came too late, and both morally and on the timeline.
And to me, I was kind of stunned. Jackie Earle Haley, who is a great actor, played Alexander Stephens, and you can just see in his face the absolute stupidity of, it's like he's been hit upside the head with a ball-peen hammer when he's told, no, we're not going to let you keep your slaves. And he says, sorry, this is a war, gentlemen, and it's over. And no, we fought this war for slavery because it was the right thing to do. And yet it's still, we're still fighting parts of it even today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we've turned a corner, I hope.
Well, we still got 2 more quotes to go, man.
I know, that's right. We got. You're next, Martin.
All right. I will go next.
Because Robert always has to go in. Just remind folks, Robert's the hammer. He always he wouldn't even tell us during show prep what his quotation was going to be, even though he knew what our quotations were going to be, because it's the conversation, not the quotations, that determines where we go with this, where the hammer falls.
Conversation plus bourbon equals Robert the Hammer.
You're exactly right. I can't argue with that.
I love that.
Conversation plus libation equals Robert.
Excellent.
This is good. Yeah, that's right. I was going to say so. You're quite eloquent this evening.
I'm on it tonight. Yeah.
You yourself are fecund in the idea department. There's that word again. I like using that.
I will have to remember that. Conversation plus libation.
That's right.
So, all right. So my quote is from Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. Not the jurist, not the Supreme Court justice. That was his son.
Okay.
But Oliver Wendell Holmes was a prolific author and a physician in the 1800s. Probably his most famous work is The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table, kind of a series of essays told from sort of a Yankee, Massachusetts, New England type perspective,
right?
Of someone sitting around the breakfast table, pontificating a bit. One of my heroes, P.J. O'Rourke, had a takeoff in one of his books of The Autocrat of the Breakfast Table, and P.J.'s book was called The CEO of the Sofa. So, but Oliver's quote is, "Controversy equalizes fools and wise men in the same way, and the fools know it." So that's another one of.
I think that's one that bears repeating. And get our minds wrapped around it.
Controversy equalizes wise men and fools, and the fools know it.
You are very deep, sir.
Yes.
So, give us a little bit of where you take meaning out of that, because I think of a bunch of different ways we could go with that, but I want to hear what's your commentary on this.
It's kind of that when you give your kids advice, don't get into it with other kids, because it's like wrestling with a pig. You're both just going to get muddy, and the pig enjoys it.
Oh yes, that marvelous quotation. I love that quotation.
So it's very much in that vein for me of, okay, somebody said something stupid, but if I start to reply, I'm getting in the hog wallow with them, and we're just going to both end up muddy, and it's not worth it. And like I said, the fools know that part. That's how they know they can bring you down to their level.
Mm-hmm. They can't compete with you on your level. They have to bring you down to theirs, and it takes controversy, among perhaps many other things, but in this case, Controversy brings you down there. That's well said, sir. You're exactly right. Controversy. So we can say then, controversy is the tool of fools.
Yep.
So, do you have a situation in mind that illustrates this? Because we love our real world illustrations of our quotes.
Twitter. Almost all of Twitter is again, you gin up a controversy,
and
you try to pull people into it, and the people ginning up the controversy, sometimes it's or taking some small piece of something that's genuinely a difficult issue, and ginning up a side thing of it, and they're trying to pull you in. So, one of my quotes in the past was that great Black Sabbath song lyric that I love so much, "If you listen to fools, the mob rules." I find these two statements, bookends.
Okay, yeah.
So, we're in, if you listen to fools, the mob rules. Well, we just had mob rule in what was it called? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Or I think
going on.
No, it's finally been bulldozed, I think.
Okay. Being on vacation this week, I've not watched any news. None at all.
Good for you. But, I mean, it basically turned into mob rules because self-appointed security people, turned into basically warlords. And so all of these people that were so foolish and thought, well, this is going to be wonderful. There's no police. There's no anything.
There's also no law.
Yeah, there's no law. Something always walks into that vacuum.
That's right.
Yeah.
Don't be so foolish.
Is the prime example.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they had. They had, 12 square blocks or whatever it was in Seattle, Washington, in the middle of a huge major metropolitan city that was essentially Mogadishu circa 1992.
Well, maybe not quite that violent, but it's the template.
It was close. There's it's starting to come out now that two kids in a Jeep driving around doing donuts were opened up on basically by the security, self-appointed security, and basically were murdered, executed for doing donuts. And will anyone ever be prosecuted for that? Who knows? There's no evidence anymore other than two dead bodies in a shot-up Jeep. So it's it turned into chaos because we listened to fools, and controversy drags the wise man down to the fool's level.
Yeah, I think the thing about this quote that was, and probably for many is going to be hard to really think through is this. We don't mean foolish and fools in that they're blithering idiots.
Right.
We mean that they are, they have either horrible judgment or they have horrible intentions.
Perhaps
in
both.
what they're doing.
Foolish intentions.
Also, what's your
uneducated intentions?
Uneducated intentions.
Ignorant, which is the lack of knowledge. I think what you're talking about here is very similar. Those that would do this, the fools that you're talking about, could perhaps be best described from one of my favorite quotations from The Dark Knight. Some people, Mr. Wayne, just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
And my Michael Caine voice there, which is actually not too
very
bad.
Good Michael Caine.
Very good Michael Caine.
That's right, because it's very true. I mean, and it describes the Joker, of course, in the movie, but it's very much what you're talking about here. Fools, Twitter is the same way. People, they want the reaction. That's why they are inflammatory. It goes back to what I've said time and time again. A certain percentage of us, many of us, and in this case, the quotation would say they are fools, just want the Colosseum. They want blood. They want to see blood on the floor, and they're not satisfied unless they get it. And there is, gentlemen, there is a problem with that.
Well,
we keep saying we're civilized, and yet this sort of stuff keeps going on.
But part of the problem though I have with is not have a problem with the quote, but sometimes if you don't engage the controversy, engage the fool will gain a following. The following will grow, and the following then becomes the norm and possibly enshrined in law. So sometimes the wise have to engage the foolish.
Well, yeah, anything else would be a lack of leadership, right?
Yes.
And that's one thing. That's one thing that we're all. I mean, that's probably one of our the greatest sins of all. I mean, that is lack of leadership, because there's no reason for it. That just proves somebody doesn't have the will and the wisdom. You have to have both, because dictators have plenty of will, not much wisdom. I might be stealing from Thomas Hobbes a little bit, but I like doing that because it does kind of work.
Robert, I really like that though. You guys are right. Sometimes that's the path to learning. If the fool is not willing to undertake that individual journey, sometimes there has to be a teaching. And you're right, that teaching is leadership. Very good, guys. Very good.
Sometimes you don't know that you're engaging with a fool until he refuses to engage back with you. Because that's the thing about Twitter, most of the crap that goes on in almost any social media. But you're right, Twitter, I think, is the best example of it, because there's no real person behind your Twitter profile like there is on Facebook. You don't see who your family is. You don't see what you did last year for Christmas and Fourth of July plans.
It's essentially faceless.
Exactly.
The least humanizing platform.
It is.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't know that you're engaging a fool because the fool has not yet proved it to you.
Yeah.
You may suspect it.
That's right.
Well, you're right. What happens most of the time on Twitter is nobody budges.
Right.
You get into an argument, and that argument devolves into, no, I use this word, not that word. It comes down to these small semantic nitpicks.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever budges. No one ever acknowledges the other person's humanity.
It's an outgrowth of what we lament almost every episode that is not a history episode. And that is, once you demonize the enemy, you cannot make peace with the devil.
That's right. That's where we're at.
Because you are tossing aside the innate dignity of the human person.
Yes.
We got it in twice this episode now.
That's right.
Well, we keep coming back to it because it works.
Inherent dignity of the human person.
Inherent dignity, yeah. That's now that we've fleshed that out, I really, really am liking that, because at first listen, it sounds like you're saying that the wise person is stupid for engaging with the foolish through the controversy, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you have to. The fool knows it precisely because they know they're not going to budge.
Yeah.
Well, it's all they can do is be foolish. Sometimes
the wise person often thinks that they will budge. They want to talk about it. They want to discuss it, work through to, if not a compromise, a common understanding. And the fool, as we're using it here, there is no such thing.
Yeah. The wise person is being foolish by trying to convert the fool.
Yeah, and you either agree with me or screw you. You're not even worth talking to.
Well, it goes back to one of my favorite sayings. I refuse to have a battle of wits with an unarmed person.
Yes,
and that's what we're talking about here.
It is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to open one's mouth and prove it.
Yes,
and confirm the suspicion.
That's right.
All right, so Robert, what have you got, man?
That's right. We have tilled the ground so well.
I have three that really, really work for what we've discussed. One directly comments on Francis, and I think the other kind of ties in with what we were just talking about with this fool and the wise man quote. But I'm going to have to go with the first one that came to mind from my list, because it applies to both as opposed to being a little bit more geared towards one or the other. So this is Margaret Thatcher. So we love our Maggie quotes.
Oh, yeah, we love Maggie.
2 thumbs up.
And this one is, you may have to fight a battle more than once to win it. So, that to me is, it's just such an eloquent way of saying so many different things that we say all the time. Things like, your quote on history, Martin, about those who are, don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and those who do know history are doomed to watch. Or to me, I like to say, history may not repeat, but it certainly rhymes. And but to have to fight a battle more than once to win it, that very much takes courage, moral courage, not just physical, to go back to the well over and over. And most often, what we're going back to the well over and over to win the fight, what we presume is the good fight, is that engaging controversy with the fool. Because, like I said, my worry is that sometimes because of the day and age we live in, because of technology, anybody with an internet connection can build a following. And sometimes it's going to be, wow, these are just 3 guys that are really fun to listen to. Sometimes it's going to be somebody who's espousing very dangerous things, dangerous morally, dangerous to society, just dangerous. Sometimes it's going to be something you may not think is dangerous, but the more people that follow it and latch onto that idea, it turns dangerous. And so you got to have courage to be willing to fight that same battle over and over. Because let's face it, there are a lot of battles that we do fight over and over as a people.
Oh, yes.
Starting from whether or not you're going to have slaves in the first place, when the Constitution was framed, that was a big debate. That almost killed the Constitution in the 1780s. A lot of people don't realize that. Now, it was not as big as it later would become, but that was also part of the controversy of the census. People say the Constitution only counted African slaves and people of color as 3/5 of a person. Well, that's true and it's not true. They weren't 60% of a person. They weren't not fully human. They were only going to count 60% of them for the census, for representation in Congress. Now, it's one way to express that same thing, because you're saying you're not fully a citizen of this place where you live and work. But it's that same battle has been fought. When you get to the 1820s, you're going to fight it there. When you get to the 1840s and 1850s, you're going to fight it there until finally war erupts. You're going to fight it in Reconstruction. You're going to fight it all throughout the late 19th century and early 20th century. It kind of falls off the radar with World War I and the Depression and World War II. But in World War II, and I think that's when it really starts coming a little bit farther, because you see examples where, not since the Civil War, do you see men who are black, who are African Americans, actually fighting as equals. Mm-hmm. They're still segregated to a large degree. It takes a while for that to happen, but you see the Tuskegee Airmen, which is one of the great stories of World War II.
Tuskegee Airmen.
Mm-hmm.
They are, that story I could listen to all day, because first thing I take out of that is just the bravery, the courage,
right.
the fantastic abilities of those men. Because I didn't realize this until I saw the movie that came out many years ago. They didn't lose anything they were escorting. They were fighter pilots. They didn't lose the bombers that they escorted. That's how good they were. There were planes that wanted to be escorted by them. It says, no, I don't want that squadron. I want these guys, because they knew they were safer. That also is a moral stand. It takes moral courage to do.
Moral leadership.
Right.
Moral leadership, yeah.
And because of their example.
Yes, we're oppressed, but we're going to set an example that we're the same, we're equal, we're as good a team as anybody else.
Well, yeah, because and they, in many respects, blaze the trail, because it's not that many years later that Truman integrates the armed forces, which is the first moment where actual integration on a federal level happens, and it's only 10 years, 12 years later that the Civil Rights Act is taken care of. You can see the progression of how society has changed. There were some holdouts, of course. Well, there are.
They're relatively. I mean, they're very small, but they're very vocal.
I know we've almost stamped it out. I know that it'll never completely happen, but
right, because anything different, is always going to be difficult to accept.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, skin color is one of those things throughout history because it is it's just so visual. It's not something you can hide. And those that fear what is different have something to latch onto, and what is different that you're afraid of, you tend to dehumanize. But my point is, with the fighting these battles, having that courage, we're still fighting those. We fought it in the '60s, we fought it in the '70s, all the way
today,
and we're still fighting it today.
That's right.
We're fighting it, the more subtle expressions of it.
Right.
I'm not saying that the killing of black men by police is a subtle expression of it. I'm talking about the things that tend to be systemic.
Right. We're rooting out the virus wherever it has been hiding out. It was obvious in the early days. It's less obvious now. And that doesn't mean we are less vigilant. In fact, we still work harder. You have to work harder to clear out all the corners than you do to sweep the middle of the floor.
Oh my gosh, that is a great example. And I love that because I've been cleaning out my garage and my basement this week.
What an analogy, Francis. What an analogy.
Well, thank you, sir.
It is so true, because when you are sweeping up the garage or the basement, the corners you spend probably 25% of your time on. And 5% of
the Civil War is when you brought in the dumpster and filled it, but we've been cleaning up the rest of the place ever since, and we're finally trying to get it where it looks like, maybe we might be getting this thing almost clean, knowing it never will be completely, of course. But, I'm great hope for us as humans.
I got a great story that it kind of illustrates this. It's not exactly tied to my quote, but what you were talking about, we're taking care of the big stuff, we're now taking care of the little stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a professor that he's teaching some business class, and he brings in a big clear container. And he says, is this full? What can you, of course, no. So he puts these big rocks into it. And he says, is it full now? All the way to the top. Is it full now? Yes, it is. Well, then he takes gravel and he pours it in and, shakes it up, and the gravel settles to the bottom. And he says, is it full now? Well, about half the class says, yes, it's full now. But the other half is catching on.
Right.
No, it's not. So then he pours sand in and fills it up, shakes it so that it is full. And he says, is it full now? Everybody says no. So he pours in water and fills in what are still gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Gaps you can't even see. Now he asks the class, what do you what did I just prove? What did I show you? Kid raises his hand and says, no matter how hard you try, or no matter how busy you think you are, or how big your list is, you can always fit something else in. And the professor says, no, you have missed the point entirely. The point is, you have to take care of the big things first. Because if you fill it in with the water, the little thing, that is, you can't hold a piece of water, right?
Right.
Not like you can hold sand or gravel or big rocks. If you don't take care of the big stuff first, you can't make room for the little stuff that comes after.
Well said, sir.
And that's exactly the kind of thing that fighting this battle more than once is. We fought the battle the first time with freeing the slaves. That's the big rocks. Reconstruction, freeing them, giving them the vote, enshrining that in the Constitution. That's taking care of the next steps. And then things like integration into the armed forces, passing the Civil Rights Act, and all the things that follow after that, that's filling in the gaps. But it's still fighting the same battle.
Still fighting the battle.
Absolutely, that's right.
And over.
Battle against fools.
Does require courage.
That's right.
A brave people is willing, a courageous people is willing to turn their society upside down to do what is right. And I'd like to think that's what we've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people like to condemn the United States for our past. But I honestly believe, I truly believe, that throughout our history, we've been getting better and better. It's slow. It's in fits and starts. Sometimes we'll take a step back before we take 2 steps forward. Sometimes we take 2 or 3 steps back before we can get back to where we were. But overall, our progression is forward. And it's precisely because we have the courage to fight the battle over and over, that moral courage. And, as you said, Martin, willing to engage the fool. Willing to get dirty, because sometimes you have to. Sometimes you got to roll around in the mud with the pig no matter how much he likes it. Because eventually, that pig's going to be bacon and sitting on your plate.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. That's oh, God, I'm hungry too, guys.
That's why the pig is so great. What a great animal. It takes horrible things like fruit and turns it into something wonderful like bacon.
Like bacon.
Bacon is one of those reasons that God shows us that He loves us.
It's the first. It's the primary of the 5 food groups. 5th being bacon itself.
Yes.
My favorite meme was a picture of a pig says, "I turn garbage into bacon. What's your superpower?"
Yes.
He's like, I can't stop that.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, what do you think, guys? Think we've wrapped that up, man?
I think we have. I think man, this is one of our. We always do great with these episodes. This one might be one of our very, very best. I think the more we do, the better we get, as it should be.
We covered a lot of ground. We stood against the mob, but at the same time, we stood for education and enlightenment, intellectual curiosity,
moral certitude,
moral leadership.
That's right.
So there's a lot of meat on that bone right there.
Sometimes
like a great big hunk of rib. Sorry, I'm starving, boys.
Sometimes standing against the mob is the only way to ensure that the mob gets what they really need and want.
Oh, now there's profundity for you. That's right. Despite themselves. That's right.
Yeah,
they're made better by the wisdom that they're resisting.
Well, it's not so much that they're resisting it, but the mobs tend to run on anger.
Right.
And the more righteous the anger, which we are certainly seeing righteous anger, the harder it is to sit down to try and move forward, because you want to tear everything down, and I still think there's a lot worth not tearing down. So
amen to that. That's right.
So Francis, what's next?
Oh, next time, now that we've done our pop culture, you guys know what comes next.
We just did
Code of Honor. You're correct. Sorry. Slip of the tongue there. Since we've done Code of Honor, we're going to our heroes next time. And this is one of Martin's requests, and he's going to captain this bad boy. We're going to do George Orwell, believe it or not. We're going to talk about his work. We're going to talk about the man. We're going to talk about why he's worth knowing, why he's worth understanding, and the great wisdom that his works brought forth for generations to come afterwards. Don't miss it.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.